Feliciano, before the recent US military action in Venezuela, in which former President Nicolas Maduro was captured, Brazil had been actively trying to de-escalate. Now the country faces a US intervention next door in a government effectively under US supervision. How has this changed the political relationship between Brazil and Venezuela and also between Brazil and the United States?
So it has changed dramatically because for Brazil, a U.S. intervention in South America, military U.S. intervention in South America, is maybe Brazil's biggest foreign policy defeat and failure in the history of Brazil's diplomacy, because it's the last time we had a foreign power intervening in South America military was Germany in the beginning of the 20th century. For 100 years in South America, nothing like that happened. It happened in Central America by the Americans, but nothing like that. So there is a big change of scenario in Brazil, not only in Brazil, but the entire continent over that. Although 58% of the Brazilians were in favor of the military intervention in Venezuela, which is very striking. There were some surveys ran right after the intervention. 58% of Brazilians were in favor of the intervention and 40% were against. It's very clear that despite this support from the Brazilian people, for Brazil itself is a threat. Because now one of the first things that happen in Brasilia, the first thoughts that happen in Brazil is, are we the next target of the U.S. New militarism, right? There's a new interventions, right? So for us, it's a big strategic defeat. For Venezuela, it's also negative in a sense that now they not only lost a president, which is, in my opinion, was a dictator. I'm not weeping for Maduro whatsoever. But reality is that a foreign power intervened in Venezuela, kidnapped their president. And now the current administration, which is the current regime, the same regime, is under some sort of protectorate from the United States. So now there are very clear lines that the Venezuelan government cannot cross, so they don't have full sovereignty and full freedom to do whatever they want in their own territory. And the U.S. has now the capacity to extract oil from Venezuela in a way that they never had in South America before. Some people even say that some Americans are considering the Venezuela oil deposits or oil reserve the American reserve, consider their own reserve. So far, it's unlikely that the Venezuela will be able to profit from the oil, the new oil that they're going to start extracting. On the other hand, the U.S. is pushing for some political opening in Venezuela, and that's what we saw, and that's what we see in the last couple of weeks. So there is some hope that free and fair elections might be able to be held in the near future, in the medium term, not now, the next couple of months, but it may be a couple years from now. Now, just to finalize, if Venezuela returned to a democracy, a liberal democracy with regular free and fair elections, at the end of the day, will be good for South America and for Brazil to have a democratic country in our neighborhood. But if they continue to be controlled by the United States, then there's a big problem for us. So it's mixed feelings. We don't know exactly what it's going to be in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Mexico has announced plans to provide humanitarian assistance to Cuba, which is suffering from a deepening economic crisis after Venezuela's oil shipments stopped. Many see this as part of an effort by the US administration to also bring an end to Cuba's communist government. How does Brazil assess the current developments in Cuba?
So the Brazilian government is not talking about it. That's an indication that that's a very difficult issue to talk about during an election year. We're going to have a national election in October. In a different year, let's say last year, if this situation happened last year or the year before, Lula would have more freedom to support the Cuban regime to some extent. He would probably give more assistance, humanitarian assistance to the Cubans. I think Brazil will do something now, but if that had happened a couple years ago, then Brazil will be more free to do it. And why is Lula not doing so much? Because he knows in this election year there is going to be again a very close election. If he opens, if he openly supports the Cuban regime against the United States, just like what Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico is doing, the opposition in Brazil will easily target him and attack him during the election year. This is a close election that is going to be again be decided by 2-3% margin. So he cannot make any political mistake in this regard. It's the same answer to Venezuela. Why was not Lula so much against the U.S.? He was against U.S. intervention, but he did not give us a long and very strong speech against the U.S. intervention, because he knows the more he supports Maduro or anything, or he shows to support Maduro, it's more likely that the opposition will attack him in this election year. So he cannot do that. So he criticized the U.S. intervention mildly for his standards, and he will continue to do so. And also, if Brazil actually supports Cuba, just like Mexico, the Mexicans are doing, then they will be targeted by the United States, possibly targeted by the United States. So Lula will visit Trump in March. So if he fully supports the Cuban now, that can tarnish and destroy his meeting with Trump in a couple of weeks. So he cannot do that either. So.
Okay, thank you. In recent years, Brazil has distinguished itself as a welcoming destination for refugees from Venezuela, adopting a relatively liberal refugee policy that goes beyond the Geneva Convention, similar to other Latin American countries. This stance seems noteworthy against the backdrop of current shifts not only in the US but also in the EU. How do you assess the direction this policy may take, and how is it perceived within Brazilian society? And are there debates or tensions similar to those in European countries?
No, immigration in Brazil is not a domestic issue yet. The number of foreign immigrants in Brazil is very low. Even after the wave of Venezuelan immigration, the last census indicated less than 2 million people from abroad living in Brazil. You have to remember it's a 215 million inhabitants country. So it's not common to see foreigners, and they don't participate so much in Brazilian society. It's a rare event. And the far right in Brazil is different from the far right in the global north on this stance. The far right in Brazil is not so much race-based as it is in Europe or the United States, because in Brazil we have this myth of the racial democracy. It's a myth that we did not have racism, that we have a mixed race society. The far right defends the idea of a mixed race society in one hand. In the other hand, they have never picked up the idea of an immigrant as an enemy of the state. First, because there aren't that many, and second, because in this they defend what they call the traditional Brazilian family. So their enemy, let's say their target, is the left wing, is never the immigrant. So for that reason alone, immigration is not a hot issue in Brazil. We did a very good thing with the Venezuelans. We created the welcoming operation in the border with Venezuela. So every Venezuelan that enters Brazil is immediately giving papers to work in Brazil, to live in Brazil. We give them full vaccination, full public health care system card. And they stay in the border for 3 months. And then the Air Force goes there, picks them up and brings to the other main cities in the south and southeast of Brazil to work. And they can only be sent to the south and southwest if they already have jobs given by some company or by some other. So the unemployment rate of Venezuela and Brazil are nearly close to zero. Again, 200 million inhabitants, less than 1 million Venezuelans. It's easy to observe. If this number goes up to 2 million, we will be able to observe them in the same way. The idea, and you have to, in this operation, the welcoming operation was created by Temer administration, which is the administration that only lasts for 2 years after Dilma president was impeached. And during Bolsonaro years, the far-right president, he continued and expanded this operation. So even the far-right are more welcoming to immigration than it's different from the global north in this sense.
Okay. The last question is, in the end of January, President Lula criticized CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, saying it had not even managed to issue a joint statement condemning illegal military interventions in the region. In doing so, he highlighted the ideological and political divisions within the region. Feliciano, how do you see Brazil's role in this context?
I think this is another failure of Lula's foreign policy, regional politics, right? Lula wanted at the beginning of the administration to re-inaugurate UNASUR that was created during his first administration. UNASUR was a South American organization to more or less block U.S. influence in South America. It was created by Brazil, was led by Brazil. All South American countries were members, but during the Temer years and Bolsonaro years, it was closed down. It was frozen first and then closed down. So Brazil was unable to sustain and keep its own most important regional organization for too long, right? Yeah, it lasted for a couple of years only. And when Lula was elected and he started his administration in 2023, he wanted to reinstate the organization. And all the other South American presidents, including the ones from the left, said, no, we don't want that. So CELAC was the remaining institutions in place, but CELAC was initially created by the Mexicans. It's only a consensus-based platform that doesn't have it doesn't have the institutional capacity to coordinate actions or even to come up with public policy in the region. And when he goes, and CELAC, as Lula himself said, was unable to criticize President Trump's intervention because a lot of the right-wing governments in South America were publicly in favor. Milei from Argentina, Sebastián from Paraguay, the new president of Chile that is coming up, the president of Peru, the president of Ecuador. They were all in favor of the intervention. Right? So the majority of the presidents were in favor of what the United States did. They're working against their own interests, right? Because at the end of the day, it means that any South American country it can be targeted by the United States with military forces now. But because they're so aligned and they're so afraid of President Trump, they supported his intervention.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for these interesting insights and your assessments of from a Brazilian perspective.
Thank you for the opportunity for HSS.